Hey, before we dive in, a quick heads up. This series is called Validating the BPD Life, and that's exactly what it's here to do. Validate the experience of living with borderline personality disorder, hopefully making you feel a little less alone. That said, if you don't have BPD, there's still value here, especially if you've loved or currently love someone who does. But fair warning, we'll be talking about some heavy stuff. Self-harm, self-destructive behavior, hospitalizations, and a lot of emotional pain. You might feel grief, guilt, anger, rage, shame, or confusion while watching. And if you do, that makes sense. Don't judge yourself for feeling anything. Don't shame yourself for being triggered. Emotions show up for a reason, even if you don't know that reason right away. If it helps, try saying, "It makes sense I'd feel this way after everything I've been through." And if you've ever been hospitalized or felt like you were losing your mind, I wrote a book about my own experience at a psych ward, and you can grab it at the link right here. Or here. To be honest, I'm not sure where I'm going to put it, so I'm just going to say grab it. It supports the work I do and might help you feel a little less lonely on this journey. All right, without further delay and nothing more to say, buckle up, Buttercup. It is time to walk the middle path towards common humanity and a wise mind. They said DBT would make me sane. Did it? I don't know. Well, maybe. A little bit? Either way, let's start at the beginning. I had never heard of DBT until my diagnosis. And if I had gone back into psychotalk therapy, there's a very good chance I am not still here with you sharing these videos. I was in talk therapy since I was literally 12 years old. Here's the thing though, being in a therapy or with a therapist that is not actually getting to the underlying issues isn't able to see you for who you really can be, and is someone that is, someone you can't be honest with, is basically like driving with your eyes closed. Sure, you're moving, maybe your other senses even become heightened. Eventually, you will crash at some point, no matter what. This can show up in a lot of ways. If you're religious and you only see therapists who share your religion, they are not looking for solutions outside of your religion for religious reasons. If your therapist thinks addiction is a disease, then they'll send you to a 12-step group. Shit, they might send you there even if they don't think that, because they've never read the book The Sober Truth or Chasing the Scream. If you know, you know. Highly recommend. Basically, a lot of therapists do their best, and unfortunately their best is often at the expense of the client. I don't believe in God, so all I can say is thank the lucky stars I had a therapist at the time of my hospitalization that recognized my behaviors for what they were, literal symptoms pointing to a consistently missed diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Any therapist worth their salt knows that if BPD is the diagnosis, then the first intervention to try and see if it's a good fit is dialectical behavior therapy, which, thankfully, I did end up in, and it's why I'm here today. A comprehensive program saved my life. I've learned since my own experience there are a lot of different places claiming to offer DBT skills groups. Let's clear up what DBT skills group is and isn't by asking what is DBT skills and what is a DBT skills group, and is it really just for intense people? If you've ever heard of DBT and thought that's for people who are way more messed up than me, or I'm not that dramatic, you're not alone. Dialectical behavior therapy in the skills group was originally designed for people struggling with intense emotions, impulsivity, and suicidal thoughts. However, all of us could use better tools for dealing with stress, relationships, and big emotions. DBT puts language and structure around that. DBT Skills Group is a space where you learn practical, evidence-based techniques to help you stay grounded, express yourself clearly, and stop spiraling when things get hard. You don't have to spill your guts or perform your pain. It's not group therapy in the traditional sense. Think of it more like an emotional life class. You learn 4 key skill sets. Mindfulness, how to stay present without judgment. Distress tolerance, how to get through crisis moments without making it worse. Emotion regulation, how to better understand and work with your emotions. And interpersonal effectiveness, how to ask for what you need, set boundaries, and stay true to yourself in relationships. A lot of people, even some people with BPD, which is like, come on, still say, but wait, do I really need that? Well, need will be up to your care plan. Will you benefit from it though? Probably 9 times out of 10 the answer is going to be yes. And here's how to tell whether you will or won't benefit from it. If you've ever overreacted and regretted it, shut down in conflict, lost hours to overthinking or shame spirals, felt like your emotions were too much or not enough, said yes when you meant no, gone numb and scrolled for hours just to cope, then yes, DBT could be for you. You don't have to hit rock bottom to start healing. You don't have to be intense to benefit from this work. You just have to be a person who wants to stop suffering and start feeling more in control of your life. So what's the goal of all this? It's not to fix you, it's not to erase your feelings, and it's definitely not to shame you into being more normal. The goal of DBT is simple, and it's what's ingrained throughout this entire series: to help you build a life that feels worth living. Whatever that means for you, more peace, more confidence, more safety, more love, more laughter, DBT gives you tools to move toward it. You deserve that, even if you don't believe it yet. Actually, especially if you don't believe it yet. Now, let's talk about therapy wins and some flops I've been lucky and less than lucky to experience across this continuing journey. First though, let's talk about psychiatrists. Not all psychiatrists, only the ones I kept getting and hearing about from people healing too. The ones who saw me for 15 minutes every month or two, max, and somehow walked away with strong opinions about my diagnosis, my personality, and my future, or who would still call me the wrong name after months of seeing me. The ones who raised an eyebrow when I spoke confidently about my own diagnosis, as if patient self-awareness is a red flag, as if me being articulate means I can't be struggling. The ones who seemed more committed to adjusting my meds than understanding my pain. Who rarely asked how I was actually doing, but always had a prescription pad ready. Who couldn't remember what I said last month, but were sure they knew more about my experience than I did. Psychiatry, in theory, should be collaborative. In practice, it often felt like I was just there to be managed. And I want to name, this is not because I think all psychiatrists are harmful. Some are life-saving, some listen, some care deeply. However, when the system overall rewards speed, compliance, and detachment over connection, reflection, and curiosity, it creates harm. Real harm. Especially for people with complex trauma, for people with BPD, for people who've already been told they're too much or too dramatic or unreliable narrators of their own story. If that's you, man, I see you. You're not crazy for feeling dismissed. You're not wrong for wanting more than medication. You're not the problem. You're just in a system that wasn't built to hold your full humanity. And you know what? You do deserve better. Okay, let's talk about therapy private practices in some clinics. Once again, not all therapy practices, just the ones that charge you over $200 a session while the therapist you're seeing, the person you're building trust with, gets less than half of that. Because it's part of the business model. Because the goal is to scale. Because healing has somehow become a brand. I kept running into clinics like this, where everything looked progressive on the surface. Soft colors, leafy logos, inclusive language on the website. But when you dig deeper, you realize the practice is mostly white, sometimes mostly Christian, mostly selling a version of healing that centers comfort over justice and restoration, where trauma-informed means just enough awareness to make it marketable, but not enough to actually hold space for survivors. And when you ask about things like affirming care or IPV or systemic power, you get vague answers, deflections, drop like a bad habit, or maybe even spiritual bypassing masked as psychobabble. And look, I get that it's not entirely their fault. Insurance companies are a mess. Master's degrees are expensive. Licensing is gatekept and exploitative. Clinicians are burned out and underpaid. The entire system is cracked. And these clinics aren't trying to make it better. They're just finding ways to profit from the cracks. They're building empires on top of our pain. They're branding care like it's a lifestyle product. They're selling access to healing while locking it behind paywalls, policies, and vague promises that can feel like gaslight. Capitalism has no place in mental health care. Not when people are this vulnerable. Not when we're reaching out for help, not knowing the terms, the risks, or the power imbalance. If you've ever walked away from therapy feeling more broken, more confused, or more ashamed, you're not alone, you're not being too picky, and you're not asking for too much. You're simply seeing the system clearly, and it's okay to be angry about it. You deserve care that's honest, transparent, and rooted in healing, justice, and restoration, not simply optics. All right, lastly, let's talk specifically about therapists. First of all, not all therapists are the same, and that really matters. When you're looking for a therapist, it's easy to assume that because they're licensed, trained, and experienced, you're in good hands. Here's the thing most people aren't told up front. Therapy is not one size fits all. Therapists aren't blank slates. They're people. People with worldviews, frameworks, opinions, wounds, values, and sometimes unexamined biases. Some therapists are trained in modalities that are highly structured and evidence-based, like DBT, EMDR, ACT, or IFS, and others come from looser frameworks that might be more exploratory or philosophical. That's not a bad thing, but it is a thing you deserve to know. You deserve to know what kind of therapy they actually practice, not just what buzzwords they put on their Psychology Today profile. You deserve to know what their approach is to addiction, to sex, to infidelity, to compulsions, to trauma, to repair, to power, to justice, to identity, to neurodivergence, to gender and race and spiritual abuse and systems of oppression. Why? Because these aren't just topics. These are the core experiences that shape your life. And the way a therapist thinks about these things shapes how they respond to your pain, to your desires, your shame, and your truth. And we need to name this clearly. There are entire populations that many therapists won't work with. People with borderline personality disorder, people with a history of intimate partner violence, people who've struggled with suicidal ideation or attempts, people who've acted out in ways that don't look clean or easy to hold. Clinicians across the board, from CBT to IFS to humanistic to somatic, will often refuse services to these groups, sometimes quietly, sometimes with coded language like not the right fit or outside my scope. And the truth is, this is rarely about the client. It's often about outdated ideas, outdated interventions, harmful biases, and deep fear. BPD in particular has been so deeply misunderstood and villainized that many therapists still respond to it like a diagnosis of moral failure, as if it's too messy, too chaotic, too manipulative. And because of that stigma, so many people who most need compassionate, structured care are turned away by the very people who are supposed to help. Dialectical behavior therapy, in my experience, has been a huge exception here. It was literally created for people with BPD and suicidal ideation. It assumes the best in people and teaches them how to change. And not all therapists are trained in DBT, and many who say they aren't actually practicing it correctly. That is why it's not only okay, it's crucial to ask hard questions. What modality are you most trained in? Do you work with people who've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder? What's your experience with people who've harmed others and are trying to change? How do you understand compulsive behavior, trauma responses, or relational violence? How do you hold space for people who've made mistakes? Because here's the dialectic we often don't name. Some therapists deeply care about your healing, and some are not incentivized to be transparent, especially in private practice models where income depends on you coming back. When therapy becomes a business, not everyone will be upfront about whether or not they're the right fit. Not everyone will encourage you to shop around. Not everyone will tell you the limits of their training, especially if their cancellation policy means they lose money when you don't show. This is not to say therapists are bad. It's to say you are allowed to be discerning. Therapists should be clear about their values, their training, their blind spots. If they aren't, ask. And if they're defensive, vague, or evasive, that is information too. You are not too much for asking hard questions. You are not difficult for wanting transparency. You are not resistant to healing if you don't vibe with someone's style. And you are not broken for having a diagnosis most people don't or won't understand. You are the expert of your own experience. The right therapist will honor that. Here is what I got to experience by finally getting a modality of therapy that fit with my needs and also helped me discern what I needed in an individual therapist after my DBT program ended. First, validation. Validation is not coddling. It's not enabling. It's not lying to make you feel better. It's the practice of seeing someone's experience as it is, not as you want it to be. Validation says, given what you've lived through, your reaction makes a lot of sense. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of care. You're not broken. You're responding to pain. In DBT, we learn that validating someone doesn't mean agreeing with everything they do. It means making space for the truth of their experience, their nervous system, their beliefs, their wounds. You can validate and set a boundary. You can validate and offer a new skill. You can validate and gently challenge the story someone is telling themselves. Without validation, there is no safety. Without safety, there is no change. The next gift I got from a therapy that actually fit for me was observing thoughts. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And also, just because it's not true doesn't mean you're making it up. Observing thoughts is a core mindfulness skill in DBT. It helps you slow down, pause, and notice what your mind is saying without automatically believing it or reacting to it. It's the difference between they didn't text back, they hate me, I ruin everything, versus I noticed the thought, they hate me. I noticed the feeling, panic. I don't have to act on it yet. This doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means holding your thoughts like clouds, letting them come, letting them go, not gripping too hard. Your mind is allowed to be loud. Your job is to listen with curiosity, not fear or judgment. Finally, and most useful for me, has been skills generalization. The real work isn't just doing the skills in therapy, it's doing them when it's 2 a.m. and you're spiraling. Skills generalization means taking the skills you learn, like opposite action, self-soothing, checking the facts, and actually using them out in the wild. Not just in group, not just in a workbook, but when you feel rejected, or you want to lash out, or you're deep in shame, or you're watching yourself do the thing you swore you wouldn't do again. This part is so hard because real life isn't a controlled environment. People won't always respond how your therapist does. You won't always remember the handouts, and you might still mess up. Actually, you will. You will still mess up. And generalizing your skills is what creates a life worth living. You do not have to be perfect. You simply have to practice. And every time you use a skill outside of therapy, you're proving to yourself, I am someone who can choose something different. That is powerful. So there you have it. Some wins, some frustrations, and some insights, all shared in the hope you feel a little less crazy, which of course is a judgment, and a little less alone. You got this. You're not alone. Stay skillful and stay hopeful. See you in the next one.